The Black Dahlia case, which occurred in 1947, has become one of the greatest mysteries in American criminal history, linked to the name Elizabeth Short, a young woman full of promise but facing a tragic fate. The nickname Black Dahlia was given to her after the case shocked the public and attracted the attention of the media. This name not only stemmed from Short's alluring appearance, with her long dark hair and mysterious charm, but was also inspired by a famous film, The Blue Dahlia, released in 1946. Although the film was not directly connected to Short, the combination of the color black and the name Dahlia left a lasting imprint on the public's mind, creating an eerie image of the woman with a fateful end. Elizabeth Short was born on July 29, 1924, in Boston, Massachusetts, into a family with 5 daughters. She was the third child, carrying big dreams and aspirations, but her life began with many challenges and misfortunes. Though she was born in Boston, it was not a place she could call home for long. Elizabeth's entire life was marked by significant changes, from family tragedies to her constant moving from one city to another. Her family faced considerable hardships from the time Elizabeth was very young. Her father, Cleo Short, was the director of a mini golf company, but after the stock market crash of 1929, his business went bankrupt and the family fell into poverty. The greatest loss for Elizabeth came with the mysterious disappearance of her father in 1930. He left home without explanation, leaving only a letter of apology. From then on, Elizabeth's mother, Phoebe May Short, took on the sole responsibility of raising the 5 daughters. Despite the difficult circumstances, she worked hard to support her family, trying her best to provide love and care for her children, especially Elizabeth. Elizabeth's life in her early years was not easy. She suffered from asthma and bronchitis, which forced her to frequently move between Florida and Medford, places with warmer climates that helped improve her health. However, it was not just her health issues that caused her difficulties. The ongoing family struggles were also a heavy burden. Despite all of this, Elizabeth always held on to the hope for a brighter future. At the age of 19, Elizabeth decided to leave Medford to live with her father in Vallejo, California, where he worked at a naval shipyard. However, their relationship was not smooth, and after a major argument, Elizabeth left him to strike out on her own. She continued her journey through various cities from Lompoc to Santa Barbara and eventually to Florida. In Florida, Elizabeth met Second Lieutenant Matthew Michael Gordon, Jr., a U.S. Air Force officer. Though their relationship had only just begun, Matthew wrote to Elizabeth proposing marriage after recovering from a plane crash. Tragically, just a few months later, Matthew lost his life in another plane crash in August 1945 before they could marry. His sudden death deepened Elizabeth's sorrow and made her lose faith in life. Elizabeth's life can be seen as a series of setbacks and losses. After Matthew's death, she returned to California to pursue new opportunities, and it was here in Los Angeles that her tragic end would come in 1947. The final months of her life in Los Angeles were not only filled with attempts to find new opportunities in a city full of dreams, but also marked the time when she would face one of the most tragic and mysterious stories in American criminal history. On the morning of January 15, 1947, a shocking event unfolded in Los Angeles when the body of Elizabeth Short was discovered in a vacant lot near Leimert Park. A mother walking with her child was the first to spot the horrific scene. This discovery sent shockwaves through the city and quickly drew the attention of the media. Elizabeth's body was not only severed in half, but it was also arranged in a bizarre manner, almost like a staged scene, making it feel less like a simple murder and more like a deliberate act with a message that the killer wanted to convey. The most disturbing part of the discovery was the complete absence of blood. Elizabeth Short's body seemed to have no blood left in it at all. indicating that she had been killed elsewhere before being transported and discarded at the crime scene. The way her body was severed and placed in such a strange position was not just an act of murder, but also an attempt to create a chilling, haunting spectacle. This act didn't just spark outrage, but also left investigators baffled, as it suggested a level of calculation and cruelty that was beyond imagination. When investigators arrived at the scene, they were horrified by the condition of Elizabeth's body. Her face was slit in a manner resembling the Glasgow smile, deep cuts extending from the corners of her mouth, creating a grotesque, twisted smile. These wounds, along with deep cuts on her thighs and chest, indicated that the victim had endured brutal torture before her death. The precision of these cuts suggested that the killer had carried out this act with careful intention rather than in a fit of rage or in a moment of impulse. The parts of Elizabeth's body were arranged in abnormal positions, almost as if the killer's goal was not only to murder her, but to create an image that would terrify anyone who saw it. The way her body was severed and arranged, along with the absence of blood, made it clear that this was not a typical crime. This was a staged spectacle, a kind of message that the killer was sending. Nearby the body, investigators found several pieces of important evidence. A blood-filled cement bag was discovered, suggesting that the body might have been transported from another location before being dumped at the crime scene. This cement bag was one of the first clues to suggest that the murder did not occur at this spot, but rather that the killer had carefully disposed of the body here. In addition, the scene showed traces of high heel shoe prints and tire tracks, indicating that the killer may have used a vehicle to move the body to this location. However, these pieces of evidence only raised more questions than they answered, as none of the clues were clear enough to directly link to a specific suspect. All of these traces only deepened the mystery of the case, making it one of the most puzzling and widely discussed unsolved murders in American criminal history. What made the case even more chilling was the possibility that the perpetrator had some knowledge of medical procedures, as the cuts on the body were unusually precise. This was not just a grisly murder, but a case that left investigators baffled, as there was no clear motive or obvious suspect. Following the murder, the media turned Elizabeth Short's death into a public spectacle, rather than focusing on investigating the tragic crime. Sensationalist headlines quickly emerged, with many newspapers portraying Elizabeth as a whore or promiscuous woman, even though there was no evidence to support these claims. The media's misleading narratives not only distorted the public's perception of Elizabeth, but were also incredibly cruel, framing her death as something that she had somehow brought upon herself. The Los Angeles Examiner, one of the first newspapers to report on the case, made a grave mistake by contacting Elizabeth's mother, Phoebe May Short, to inform her of her daughter's death before the family had received official notification. This lack of professionalism and sensitivity added immense distress to an already grieving family. Days after Elizabeth's body was found, the Los Angeles Examiner received a package containing some of Elizabeth's personal belongings, including photographs and identification cards. The package also contained a letter from the murderer who claimed responsibility for the crime. This marked the beginning of a disturbing series of strange and cryptic letters sent to the press. The killer's letters seemed to deliberately taunt both the media and law enforcement, manipulating the investigation and prolonging the public's fascination with the case. One of the first letters not only took responsibility for the murder, but seemed to revel in the chaos the case was creating. Later, a suspect named Mark Hansen, with whom Elizabeth had lived at one point, became a person of interest after details in the anonymous letters raised suspicions. However, no concrete evidence was found to directly link Hansen to the crime. As the investigation progressed, more letters from the killer continued to arrive at the Los Angeles Examiner, each one increasingly ominous and unsettling. One letter claimed that the murderer would turn himself in, only for another letter to appear later, declaring that he would not be surrendering. The killer seemed not only to confess his crime but also to assert his control over the situation, as if playing a psychological game with the police and the public. These letters were not only confessions but also a form of manipulation, making the case even more complex and puzzling. The anonymous letters also led investigators to explore various theories about Elizabeth's life and the circumstances surrounding her murder. One letter hinted at a possible connection to the LQB+ community, prompting the police to investigate Elizabeth's relationships with bars and clubs known to cater to this community. They questioned several individuals involved, but these leads proved to be fruitless. As the investigation broadened, other theories emerged. One theory suggested that the case might be linked to a secluded house on the outskirts of Los Angeles, leading the police to investigate this possibility. However, as with other theories, this also yielded no substantial results. The deeper investigators dug, the more they realized they were trapped in a maze with no exit. The case of Elizabeth Short became emblematic of unsolved cases where various theories and speculations were raised, yet no answers were ever found, making the Black Dahlia case one of the most infamous unsolved murders in American criminal history. George Hodel, a well-respected surgeon in Los Angeles, became one of the most prominent suspects in the Black Dahlia case. Although there was not enough evidence to charge him, his connection to the victim, Elizabeth Short, through several unusual clues, made him a central figure in the investigation. Hodel was believed to have had either a personal or professional relationship with Elizabeth, and various strange details in his life raised significant suspicion regarding his involvement in the crime. One of the most suspicious aspects was that George Hodel had purchased a house not far from the crime scene. This house, along with some ambiguous traces related to phone calls and other clues in the case, piqued the attention of investigators. Strange phone calls and other traces found near Hodel's house drew the police's interest. Despite this, there was not enough concrete evidence to charge him, and the investigations could not establish a direct link between Hodel and the murder. However, a pivotal turn in the case came when Steve Hodel, the son of George Hodel, decided to personally reinvestigate the Black Dahlia case. Steve Hodel, a former officer in the Los Angeles Police Department, began to suspect his father's involvement after discovering several oddities in his family's history. One of his most shocking discoveries was an album of photos containing pictures of a young woman, one of which Steve found strikingly similar to Elizabeth Short. This discovery raised further suspicion that George Hodel might have had a connection to the victim. Additionally, Steve found that the anonymous letters sent to the media during the investigation bore similarities to his father's handwriting. This further fueled suspicions of a connection between George Hodel and the crime. Steve Hodel's findings reignited the debate over whether his father could have been the murderer, and his theory remains one of the most disgusting conversations surrounding the Black Dahlia case. Though the case remains unsolved and there is no concrete evidence to confirm George Hodel as the perpetrator, the strange circumstances surrounding him continue to play a significant role in the ongoing story of the Black Dahlia. In February 1947, just 1 month after the discovery of Elizabeth Short's body, another similar murder occurred in Los Angeles. The victim was Jean French, who, like Elizabeth, was brutally murdered, and her body was horrifically mutilated and severed in a way eerily similar to the Black Dahlia case. Jean French's body was also subjected to gruesome mutilation, leaving clear signs of extreme violence. This raised suspicions that the murder of French might be linked to the death of Elizabeth Short. The similarities between the two murders, both victims being left in public places, brutally tortured before death, and subjected to severe disfigurement, led the police and the public to question whether the killings were committed by the same person. Despite the lack of concrete evidence connecting the two cases, the striking similarities in the method of murder led investigators and the public to suspect that this could be the work of a serial killer. As a result, both the Black Dahlia case and the Jean French murder became highly publicized, and law enforcement grew more tense as they faced bizarre, similar clues in both cases. In 2013, journalist James Collins uncovered new information related to the Black Dahlia case that had not previously been considered. Specifically, he discovered a similar murder that occurred in the Philippines in 1981, with details strikingly similar to the Black Dahlia case. The victim of this crime was also killed in a brutal manner, with disfiguring cuts on the body. These eerie similarities immediately led people to suspect that the Black Dahlia murder and the 1981 murder in the Philippines could be connected. Notably, during this time, Dr. George Hodel, who was a prime suspect in the Black Dahlia murder, had lived in Cebu, Philippines. Hodel opened a clinic there and resided in the Philippines for a significant period during the late 1970s and early 1980s. After living in the Philippines, he returned to the US in the 1990s. This revelation sparked renewed suspicion that Hodel may have continued committing murders abroad during his time in the Philippines. This discovery not only increased doubts about whether Dr. Hodel could have been responsible for other murders, but it also suggested that he might have a long history of criminal activity that extended beyond national borders. While it cannot be conclusively determined whether Hodel was involved in the Philippine murder, the striking similarities in the murder methods fueled suspicions about his involvement. This information revived interest in the Black Dahlia case, while also opening up new theories about a potential serial killer operating internationally. While no final conclusions can be made about whether Dr. Hodel was the perpetrator in the Philippines case, the similarities in the method of execution only heightened the suspicion about his involvement in the Black Dahlia murder. This has further complicated the case, expanding the scope of the investigation and keeping Elizabeth Short's death an unsolved mystery. The Black Dahlia case is not only one of the most infamous unsolved murders in US criminal history, but also left a profound mark on popular culture. The death of Elizabeth Short, a young woman with so much promise, became the inspiration for countless works of literature, films, documentaries, and television shows. The mystery surrounding her death, along with the intriguing details of the case, has made it a captivating subject for authors, filmmakers, and crime researchers. Every time the story is mentioned, it is reborn in a new form, sparking curiosity and the desire to solve the lingering mysteries. With both fictional and non-fictional works, the Black Dahlia case has become an icon in the true crime genre, explored from various angles. Movies and books about the case do not just recount the events in a straightforward manner, but delve deeply into the psychology of the victim, the suspects, and society in the context of the 1940s. The haunting and mysterious nature of Elizabeth Short's death has become an inseparable part of popular culture, with her image always linked to stories of crime and injustice. Moreover, this case has also sparked interest among those who love crime genres and investigation. These individuals, including amateur detectives and true crime enthusiasts, continuously study clues, analyze theories, and seek new evidence to uncover the truth. Online forums and research groups dedicated to true crime are always buzzing with discussions about unresolved details, suspicions about the perpetrator, and overlooked pieces of evidence. These unofficial investigations have turned the Black Dahlia case into a part of modern culture, a symbol of the insatiable desire for justice. Despite over 50 people confessing to the crime, the Black Dahlia case still lacks an official resolution. The FBI continues to regard it as one of the most enigmatic and unsolved murder cases in their history. Efforts to reinvestigate over the decades have not produced any definitive results, keeping the case shrouded in mystery. The lack of clarity about the perpetrator and the unusual circumstances surrounding the investigation have turned the case into a legend with no ending. It is a prime example of the failure to achieve justice and the helplessness in solving criminal cases, even with many clues and suspects brought forward. The legacy of the Black Dahlia case is that of an unsolved story, a legend that persists in the minds of the public. Despite the passing of many decades, this case remains a hot topic in research circles and among those who enjoy the true crime genre, continuing to be an inseparable part of the collection of famous and mysterious criminal cases in American history.